Stevie Fast Jackson, I said it this morning on social media that this man's a needle mover. No matter where you stand on him, and he's an oft polarizing figure, but at the end of the day, he is a difference maker out here. He has an incredibly dedicated fan base, a seemingly ever growing fan base. It's diverse. He's competed in a lot of different classes, which I think has really helped grow his fan base. He built kind of a name for himself in the radial tire world, and took that into 8th Mile Pro Mod, carried that on to a championship and NHRA Pro Mod competition. And now we see him perhaps refocusing some of his time and attention on outlaw drag racing. We announced this morning that Stevie Fast Jackson has officially accepted his invitation to the 2024 World Series of Pro Mod. I'll admit, this has been going on in the background for a while. We've been having internal discussions because we have more cars and more interest in this event than we can really facilitate. And we have to be mindful of who gets an invitation based on their availability and their willingness to commit for 2024. And I wasn't sure of Stevie's plans. And as I was getting inside information that the car was coming along and he was going to be close to ready and perhaps ready and would more than likely be able to have a car at Donald Long's Lights Out event in February, that kind of gave me the confidence to say, okay, we can plan on Stevie being there. We had a couple of conversations, send over the invite. One thing leads to another, and we got Stevie Fast Jackson back in the mix. He's a 3-time World Series of Pro Mod competitor. He competed with us all 3 years out in Denver, 17, 18, and 19. And to be honest, him and I have had many conversations dating back several years about what could happen if this event arrived at a prime time on the schedule and at a prime facility that serves a lot of purposes for a lot of racers. And I think we saw that magic. We saw that lightning in a bottle in March of 2023. And I think we're about 50 days away from seeing it again ×2. Guys, immediate reaction to that news of Stevie Jackson re-entering the fold at World Series.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it was huge, man. I mean, I think it's like one of those things you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And with Stevie being gone for, I think he said almost 2 years, I think like 21 months with his neck injury. And he's been shuffling the deck as far as cars, sponsors, teams, the whole deal, and getting a car together to come out and run. I think it's interesting. He's going to run radial races and big tire races, pro mod races with this car. And I know on the show last night on Shaky Bake, they had Donald on there, and Donald wasn't too happy about Stevie kind of switch hitting here, going back and forth. He is going to debut the car at Lights Out, but then immediately put slicks on it and come run with us at World Series of Pro Mod. So, and again, I think that speaks to what Stevie is about, is just, you know, wherever the big hitters are, wherever the big money is, wherever the big draw is, he's not afraid to dip his toe into that water. So we'll see. A comment I saw that I thought was funny was he could have this car paid for by March if he goes out and does well and wins at Lights Out, wins our race. He could be on a roll to start the season. So definitely a lot to look forward to there.
JT, I know you're perhaps one of the big. Are you the founding member of the Stevie Fast Jackson fan club?
No, I think he had a pretty good one, because didn't he have a? I mean, he had a pretty good following from the grudge stuff too, you know, before. So I mean,
there's no doubt.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, you can't hardly have the World Series of Pro Mod without Stevie, right?
It was weird.
Everybody, that's the guy that everybody wants to beat.
Yeah.
You know,
it was a bummer not to have him there last year.
It was a bummer.
And he also did race with us in Orlando as well. I know that was a different branded event, but he was there for those events and actually crashed a car there in Orlando. So he's really, I was talking to Stevie at the Burnouts for Kids deal down at Carolina Dragway last month that Nate Prater put on. And Stevie was joking that no one has spent more money to run our events than he has, between towing all the way to Denver, tearing stuff up there, crashing that car. So he's been committed to our events, and it's good to have him back.
I'm glad to have him back.
It'll be interesting too, like as far as like Shake and Bake goes. Like how long are those guys going to be buddy? Because I mean, Lyle's going to be a problem for those guys, I think. in this ride this year.
Before we go, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I want to touch on that. But first, I was wondering, do you guys think? I mean, we saw Stevie, I believe, make an effort to qualify an NHRA competition at the Las Vegas Final National Event of the Year, kind of a sister car to Sidney Frigo's NHRA Legal Pro Mod. But I'm just curious, in mixed martial arts and boxing, ring rust gets talked about. Is this, how helpful will it be for Stevie Fast Jackson to have this opportunity to go shake that rust off at Lights Out, albeit in a different, with a different setup? I understand there's a lot of changes to the car that'll be made, but just being in fierce competition before World Series, because do you guys agree that that would be a very tough one to return at without any prior track time, competition time?
You're gonna have Donald really pissed off at you now if you're saying his race is
I'm not saying it's a warm up. I'm saying that I think it would be like if he were going somewhere to a test session. I talk about this all the time, but testing, it's no different than sparring. It's much different. You have to test. You have to spar if you want to race and you want to compete, you want to fight. But you have to be in those competitive environments. And that's why I think, I'm actually giving kudos to Lights Out, because I think that event has the necessary atmosphere. It has the necessary level of competition to get a guy in the mindset to run for big money, because let's not gloss over the fact that these guys do not often race for 6 digits. I mean, this is a rare air.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that. I mean, in 2017, with the inaugural Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod paying $100,000 to win winner take all, it was historic. That level, that dollar amount was historic. It was Donald that followed us with the $101,000 to win Sweet 16, which has largely dissipated since then. So my point is, I'm proud of having introduced this notion of 6-digit winners checks going out. But you have to admit, and we have to acknowledge, we must, give reverence and time to the things that are significant. Racing for that amount of money and having it be winner take all, it absolutely changes the dynamic dramatically. I mean, you are going up there, and it is a much different thing than having the potential to win $1,500 or $5,000 and maybe cover your diesel fuel and hotels. It's a totally different thing to talk about going home at the end of the night with $100,000, not to mention all the ancillary things that happen to the person who wins the World Series of Pro Mod. I mean, look at Spencer Hyde. We can talk about this in a separate segment, but I mean, this man, a star was born with Spencer Hyde at the World Series of Pro Mod, qualifies 32nd, hole shots his way to the final, takes out Kurt Stedding in a final round that they can hang their hat on for the rest of their lives. Both Spencer Hyde and Kurt Stedding had performances in Bradenton last spring that they can hang their hat on. That was a drag race for the ages. We've seen Spencer go on to get partnerships with Redline Synthetic Oils, a partner of ours here at the show. We signed him with Racers Club brand. He's in a video game and earning revenue from his appearance in a video game. He made his NHRA Top Fuel debut. I mean, 2023 was an absolutely insane way to run the year, or to have the year go for Spencer Hyde after winning in March. So anyways,
he's on the map now. And even Stevie last
massively.
night, I don't know what the exact comment was, but Stevie even made like a semi call out, or said he was going to call out someone like Spencer Hyde once he gets his car running. So now he's on that level where he's a target for somebody like Stevie. So that to me says a lot about what you're saying also.
Spencer Hyde this guy has, and I don't want to discredit anything, because it's not like Spencer's brand new to drag racing. He's been around the block, his family. I mean, it's a generational endeavor for Spencer Hyde. But what happened in 2023, we mustn't overlook. We saw a star born, and we saw someone become a legitimate contender across the board. Wherever he goes, his name carries those letters on an entry list carry a different level of significance and a different weight post World Series of Pro Mod win. So I bring that up just because to demonstrate how significant this moment is. And even someone like Stevie, who has accomplished so much in the sport of drag racing, this is one of those items that has eluded him. I think Stevie may have said this on the show last night, but he's had the car to beat many times before. I would argue 3 times in a row, 17, 18, and 19 in Denver, Colorado, out on Thunder Mountain. Stevie had the car to beat, and it went awry, parts failure, red light, something, and it was almost always an early stumble. He would look flawless in testing, proof of my earlier comment or evidence of my earlier comment, but it would always go awry, typically in that first round of eliminations. But again, it points to how different this environment is than anything else, excuse me, that exists in the sport of drag racing.
I agree. And what you talked about with practice and everything. I mean, nothing gets you ready, like game time. I mean, when you're in a game, you can practice all you want to. And yes, you'll go back to some of your fundamentals that you learned from practicing. But the game time, the pressure and everything involved, I mean, there's nothing to replace that besides getting in a car and getting out there and making passes in competition.
You've got to do it. So again, to give credit to Donald Long's Lights Out event, that event, to be honest, I think exists in rare air. That is one of a handful of events that exist in drag racing that have a significance beyond their sector, right? Like, in my opinion, there are the NHRA US Nationals kind of cuts through, whether you're an NHRA guy, a PDRA guy, an NMCA guy, a street legal guy, a class racer, and that race has significance. I believe it's recognized across the board.
The people that are lined up and everybody up on the starting line. I mean, yeah,
Lights Out. World Cup finals. I mean, there are a handful of these events that just hit different. World Series of Pro Mod is one of them. And my point really there wasn't to downplay or diminish the significance of Lights Out. It's to acknowledge what a perfect springboard that event will be. And the coolest thing, and this is something that I'm glad to see some of the things, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, and we can revisit this later, but I expected to see this for a long time. I think that what Stevie's doing with a multi-purpose door slammer, I think this is going to become commonplace. I'm actually surprised. I mean, we're seeing it happen slowly where, there are situations where a team's in a position to have two cars. They've got a legal car, or they've got an event or series specific car, and then they have this outlaw car that is a little more nimble, right? And they have that freedom and flexibility to change a setup and go a different direction or experiment with something. But what we're also seeing are racers like Stevie Jackson. I think Frankie the Madman Taylor falls into this category, where they've got a car that works really well in both configurations. And I've been we saw this start.
You kind of have to, right now.
I would want to.
With the car that it's going to take to enter into Radio versus World or whatever you're going to run over there. Really, there's several classes anymore it's going to take an expensive ass car. And if you're only going to have a couple of events that you can run that car at, you're going to need to figure out something where you can run this car somewhere else, or vice versa. If you're running Pro Mod and you want to go down and try that stuff too. So, it only makes sense.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think we will see an ongoing move towards this kind of different rear end setup for the configuration. Like, there's a couple things when you build these cars that are set in stone, engine placement, things like that. But the back of the car, I've seen teams have one that probably doesn't get the respect they deserve, and we should mention them while talking about the World Series of Pro Mod, is Jason Lee and Eric Gustafson. They have done a phenomenal job with that white 69 Camaro, the Coast Packing Company Camaro, and that car can be switched from RVW trim and be a threat, be a high 340 player, definitely a threat to win, has won with Jason Lee behind the wheel, but they can also dive right into PDRA Pro Boost trim. They can go into Outlaw Pro Mod trim for events like World Series, Snowbird Outlaw Nationals, US Streets, and be competitive. And I think that, I suppose it could be argued that picking something would always be the preferred route. But in a world where there are limited opportunities to race for big money and to race on a grand stage in front of a massive crowd, those are fairly limited. So I think it makes sense to have a car that you can swap
Stevie's
over.
Done that for a long time now.
Yes,
and didn't Marty Robinson do it with Bad Fish?
He
had it. I think he had like a crate where he could basically swap that
switch the
car,
car
over.
over.
Right.
Daniel Ferris did that
Daniel
a
Ferris,
while
yep.
with that blue Mustang, that Larry Jeffers Race Cars built Mustang. They switched that car over from RVW trim and actually set the world record with that car, and then would switch it to big tires. So Kevin Rivenbark has done the same thing when he was driving for Galat Motorsports. They did a similar deal where they had a car, that white 69 Camaro that was beautiful, probably one of my all-time favorite paint graphics schemes on a door slammer. Real modern looking, you know, the car I'm talking about. That car could easily be switched from front running big tire setup to front running small tire setup. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, especially as these opportunities to race. I mean, if you look at Bradenton alone, you've got the opportunity to race for what, roughly $200,000 over the course of 3 months. I mean, if you hit the Snowbird Outlaw Nationals, U.S. Streets, and World Series of Pro Mod, I mean, you do well. I mean, that's a life-changing run right there. And I've actually talked to several racers who have inquired about a series or turning it. And I'm just talking here, but like those 3 races alone could be enough for a handful of drivers. I mean, this might be a great segue. Actually, before I dive into our next conversation, and I'll leave you with this, guys. Stevie Jackson on the entry list at the World Series of Pro Mod, joining the fray, potentially being one of those 32 heavyweights that will go battle for $100,000 on Sunday, March 3rd, 2024, a day that will live forever in infamy. I think it changes the dynamic of the World Series of Pro Mod. As much as I was torn about the retirement of Tricky Ricky Smith and losing him as a competitor at the World Series of Pro Mod, I'm really glad to see another major name dive into the fold and come in with a vengeance. I don't think there's any doubt, all things considered, everything we just discussed, that Stevie Fast will be a threat at the 2024 running of the World Series of Pro Mod.